Real incident. In the 1970s, my grandfather was posted at the GIC hostel of Junior Basic Training College in Jhansi. He was a maths lecturer and was known for his honesty and simplicity. One night, while the whole family was asleep, he suddenly woke up and started writing. When everyone asked what he was doing, he told them he had a dream where many people were crying and asking him to help them. They wanted him to inform their families that they had died so they could be at peace. He didn't know any of them, but he wrote down all the names and addresses he saw in the dream. Then he wrote letters to those addresses, telling the families what he saw. Later, when he shared this with the locals, some people told him that many years ago, during the construction of a wall at that place, several laborers had died when the wall collapsed. No one ever replied to his letters, and that was the end of it. Everything is true and real in this story, as my mother told me. I would like to answer any follow-up questions if you have any. I think I was destined to serve evil. Hi guys, my name is Anna, not my real name. I was born in Brazil. I am 18 years old, and everything I'm about to share with you has happened, and still happens to me throughout my life journey, and even now. So, I was born into an evangelical family and grew up in the church. Since my mother's pregnancy, there have always been bad things happening around me. I know I've always been a very loved, wanted, and intelligent girl, and that draws a lot of envy from others. But there are certain things about myself that I still don't fully understand, or that I used to blame myself for. I'm still in a process of self-recognition. Once, when my mom was pregnant with me, already with a big belly, someone who didn't like her and was jealous touched her belly and spoke words of curse over her, but my mom immediately rebuked it, and life went on. Important detail, my mom is a woman of deep prayer and has a strong connection with God. Some years passed, and when I was around 4 to 6 years old, my mom had a dream where a demon was trying to enter our old house to possess her. But since my mom is so fervent in prayer, he couldn't get in. The demon then said, "Since I can't enter you, I'll enter the one you love the most." And immediately I screamed from my room, saying I had a nightmare and that a man was trying to get me. As I grew older, 8 to 14 years old, I was always interested in horror stuff, ritual games like Ouija, the Midnight Man, and those kinds of things that I'd watch on YouTube. Once, my parents even caught me watching that stuff. And it's worth mentioning that I hated going to church. I didn't like it at all, except when I was acting in plays. In one of those plays, we gathered for 2 weeks to interpret the story of a family full of problems who didn't know how to solve them. Both kids died in a tragic accident, and after that came the final judgment. I played the daughter. But during that time, there were several moments when I felt pursued or interesting in the eyes of these spiritual forces. My mom once saw a tall man, all in black, about 1.8 meters, entering my room while I slept. She also saw my bedroom door handle turn by itself. Or I would be at my grandma's house. She lived upstairs, above us, and when going down the stairs, I saw a black shadow standing at the door at the bottom of the staircase, just staring at me. Later, I also had moments with my church friends at my house, like kissing girls and stuff. And in the religious view, that was seen as very wrong and believed to attract bad spirits into our lives. Anyway, everything I did was always the total opposite of what my family wanted for me. When I turned 15 to 16, I developed a huge interest in Umbanda and had a big fight with my parents because they wouldn't accept or allow me to go to any of its ceremonies. And you know, these things scared me, to be honest. But not in a bad way. More like, I knew the right path, but for some reason, I couldn't follow it. I always felt aversion to the Christian side. I even tried Catholicism later, but again, I couldn't stay. There was nothing keeping me in the church. Everything got worse when I moved alone to Europe. I ended up getting deeper into occultism, and this path fascinates me a lot. I started studying demonology, became interested in Luciferianism, made new friends, and started having conversations about these topics. I even tried contacting Lucifer himself. I remember making a simple altar for him. I didn't have much money or resources, but the energy became so dense that the room got cold. even with everything closed. My body trembled without my control. That same day, I got a tattoo right in the middle of my chest with Lucifer's sigil, like a stamp in the center of me, as if saying I belong to him, even though I never made any pact or formal agreement. Sometime later, I even paid the priest who guided me back then to include my name in a collective Black Mass ritual, which is a satirical ritual that mocks a Catholic Mass to praise Lucifer and sever any Christian ties. That night after the Mass, I woke up from a dream I barely remember now, but I know a man was speaking to me in a language I didn't understand, and I answered him in that same language, completely conscious that I was speaking to him. I didn't feel anything bad, but I believe it was some sort of confirmation. After that, I stepped back a bit from the practice, because I was going through personal and emotional issues and realized I couldn't deal with that kind of energy while feeling spiritually weak. My last experience wasn't long ago. I dreamt I was walking through one of those US piers, full of shops, restaurants, and with the sea on the side. But diagonally, I saw a man following me. I felt suspicious of him at first, but then I realized he wasn't going to harm me. I didn't see his face. I only remember he wore bright sunflower yellow tailored pants and light brown leather dress shoes. And suddenly, he pulled me into a side hug, like the casual kind guys give. And right then, I felt this overwhelming, heavy pressure on my shoulders. It was hard even to get up and believe it had just happened. But honestly, this whole thing fascinates me so much. I'm not afraid of hell, or even believe in it, to be honest. I can't fully explain this feeling. Is it some kind of fetish? Not a sexual one, but a sort of pleasure in the power they give. An idealization, this craving for power, attraction, connection. On the other hand, I'm a little afraid of lowering my energetic frequency, but maybe that's just something time will tell. So, what do you say? Could this be something from past lives? Or is it something that's here to stay for a long time? P.S. I think I kind of regret having explored all this. I'll always have respect and curiosity about it, but not to the point of getting involved again. These are things that need to be handled carefully. However, I believe that because I've always maintained respect and never mocked or disrespected this side, I've been able to carry on with my life normally, without being seriously affected in a bad way. I'm now searching for other philosophies that make more sense to me. My skinwalker story in Oregon. I live in a small town in Oregon, which I will not tell which town just because of privacy, but I usually do my regular thing, go to school, play basketball, skateboard, the usual angst teenage things a kid would do when they are bored. But today was different. I was getting off my bus on a Friday night, so I was going to stay out pretty late with my friends to go skate and go to the store and probably get kicked out. But before that, I went to the minute market. I go to that minute market almost every day and know every worker by name. But today there was a new worker. He was a tall, lanky guy with a really curly long beard that almost nearly reached his waist, with a weird scar on his arm that I couldn't point to any animal I've seen or encountered myself. So I went to the back of the store, grabbed my drink and snacks, and ringed them up at about $5 exactly. The guy didn't say much besides, "Is that all? Have a good day." But right before I grabbed my board and was about to leave, I heard him mutter something to himself, and I asked, "What?" He just kept muttering to himself. So I assumed he was high or drunk, because my town is known for addicts, but isn't as bad as Portland or Salem. I left and thought a little bit, but not much of it because I'm used to it at this point, living in this town almost my entire life, besides Portland and Bend for 2 years. But I looked behind me because I heard the door of the minute market open, although no one else was in the market, and I saw the same guy working, but his scar was gone, and he was staring at me. No one was around us, which was weird for the area because of the other stores in the driveway, and I jogged away trying to play it off, still thinking he was a druggie, and I kept jogging, but he just kept slowly following faster every time I looked away. It was like he got closer every time I looked away. I made it home, but my mom gets home around 6 while my dad gets home at 9:30, and I got home around 4:30, so I did my usual with a little more caution. So I unlocked my door, closed it, and locked all 3 locks on my door, and set down my backpack to do my chores until I got a knock on my door. I went into my sister's room, which has a good view of the door, but people can't see the window, and when I looked, I audibly gasped. It was the same man from the Minute Market with the scar back, but on both arms. So I rushed to lock every window, and I did, while grabbing every weapon I could find, while slowly setting a chair under the doorknob. The more I did these things, the more aggressive the knocks got. It was like the knocks were everywhere. I didn't call 911. I should have, but I called my grandma. I come from a Native American family, and she was a very religious woman and had her own experiences with this. What she told me almost made me hang up. She said, "It knows your scent, voice, weight, height, and where you live. The only way you can get through this is to burn sage and ashes around the house or on the walls inside the house." I did the second option because I couldn't get outside for obvious reasons. What happened next almost made me pass out. It started to cut itself, using my voice, saying the exact order I placed for my snacks. "Can I get peanut butter M&Ms and this energy drink, please?" I know it sounds funny, but trust me when I say this, it didn't sound like it was ordering or anything. It sounded like a deaf person screaming, barely knowing what they are saying. I burned the sage as quick as I could and ash and surrounded my walls with it. After about 10 minutes, the thing left and hasn't come back yet, but it's only been 1 day. I will keep you updated on what happens next. Update. I've seen the guy around, but he's different. No scare, no nothing, totally average guy, and shaved his beard. But there have been random deer heads in my backyard and deer staring at me through my window. It's terrifying, because this morning I woke up to the sound of something in my room falling and hearing 3 noises under my bed. Even today I had one of my skateboards fall off my skate rack, which is hooked to the wall and was confusing. I suspect something is going to happen soon, and we'll put a new update soon. The man. I'm a male, 26, and this happened around 3 years ago, when the US was practically recovered from COVID. I used to live in Long Island, New York, which is where this story takes place. For just a quick backstory for those who didn't grow up in NY, there is a huge railroad that connects lots of towns together, and the farthest it goes up to NYC. I took a business opportunity where I needed to go up to the city every day for work as an engineer, and I would get on the train to go to the city as early as 6 a.m., and getting home sometime it would be as late as 11 p.m. Before taking this opportunity, I was never on the railroad during times like this, and I quickly came to learn that it was practically the same people on the train each time, all people going to the city and back for work, and I normally saw no new faces on my rides going there and back. One day, though, that changed. I was on a late train, probably around 10 or 11 p.m. at night during the wintertime, so it was as dark as the night got around those times. I ran to catch the railroad on time to get me home, so as you can normally expect no matter the time, I couldn't find a seat on the train. I chose to stand next to the doors and was accompanied by 2 men who looked around my age, just chopping up good conversation, and a man. He looked about to be in his late 50s. He was wearing a sort of Hawaiian shirt, which was unbuttoned around 2 buttons and his chest hair stuck out. He wore khakis, a belt, and attached to his shirt pocket, he had what seemed to be a business key card on a retractable wire, which the clear sleeve it was in was yellowing. He was white, balding, but the hair I could see was gray, and he was more heavy set. But what I really remember are his eyes. Normally, these kinds of details wouldn't be so prominent in my mind, but his mannerisms were nothing but out of the ordinary. The way this man examined the other 2 standing next to the doors, the ones in deep conversation, it was uncanny. His eyes were deep in their sockets. They were downturned, so the insides of his eyes closer to his nose were higher set than the outside corners, with a look that was so tired and sad, and his lips stayed in such a pouting expression that it nearly looked like he was taking sympathy for these men. The worst part? Every time they would make a joke, they would chuckle, but he would laugh. Loud. Louder than anyone would if they were even supposed to be included in the conversation. Just to keep my own privacy, I won't disclose which town exactly on Long Island I lived in, but I will say it is one of the last stops of the train. The man definitely made me unsettled, but I didn't think to change my spot on the train. It was packed and I was on the very first cart so that when I got to my destination, I could leave as soon as possible. I figured that I would wait to see if this man got off on one of the stops before me, and I wish I didn't. He didn't seem like a threat to me because he was so hyper-focused on these two guys. But once we got to their stop, he took a few steps, basically following them out the cart, until he saw me. I was staring. I'm not proud of it, but I had 2 headphones and listening to music, and I felt like this man had to be studied, and I accidentally just drew all the attention to myself. Something in his eyes switched for just a second, but it was horrifying. His eyes looked joyful, full of some type of childlike joy on Christmas or their birthday. And right then it was as if his feet just stopped, like they were dried in concrete, and he just stayed on the train. That is when I wanted to scream. We were a few stops away from my stop, and I had no doubt in my mind that if this guy seeing me made him stop from getting off at one stop, there is only one other stop he will get off at. Mine. Now, I know this sounds like the dumbest thing ever, but I walked home from getting off the train. I'm a big guy, not super tall, but tall enough that most guys don't tower over me. And I'm not weak, so I never had anything to really worry about. Yeah, I wasn't scared of this guy himself and what he could do, but it's more of his intentions. I'm a guy who wouldn't fight someone for fun, and it's something that would be my last resort. And the last thing I wanted to do was throw hands with this man with such a sorrowful look in his eyes. Then it was my stop. I got off, and with no surprise, he did too. I started walking at a pace that didn't scream, "I'm scared," or "I need to get away," but it was at a pace that looked normal for me. But peering behind my shoulder, I saw him matching my pace, and it looked so unnatural, uncomfortable, like it hurt for him to walk at that pace. He continued to follow my pace, and no stores nearby were open for me to go to. So as I approached my house, I remember the hill that you had to climb to reach the street. And looking at the man still matching my pace to the very best of his abilities, he looked exhausted. So I just had to pray that he wouldn't be able to climb the hill as fast as me. I approached the bottom of the hill and sprinted as fast as I could and didn't stop until I reached my house and jumped over my backyard fence. Instead of going up to my front porch to open the front door, on the chance he followed me fast enough to see me enter my house. My back door is a sliding door, however, and I couldn't unlock it unless I was in the house. So the only thing I could do was sit and wait in a bush. And I wasn't too scared of him seeing me in the pitch dark, but I was scared of him hearing me if I moved too much. I peered through my fence as I saw him climb up the hill, walking at a more comfortable looking pace for him. He started looking around, looking for a sign of me. Nothing. He approached closer, just looking around my street, and under a streetlight, I saw him. More like I saw his eyes, full of rage, no longer the joyful or sorrowful eyes I had once seen. I watched him pace back and forth on the road for a long time, until eventually he turned around and went down the hill once again. I waited for a long time before going into my house and going to bed. The next day I took off of work. I went to the police and made a report. And for the rest of the day, I decided that I wouldn't go straight from my stop on the railroad to the city anymore, and found a string of having to hop off one train to another around 3 times before going to the city, in hopes that the man would take the direct route. I never saw the man after that. This is the first time I had fully retold the story since it had happened, and I apologize for how long it is. But every time I even think about this story for too long, it reminds me of the people that are out there, and how you have no idea what intentions they have behind their eyes. Stay safe, everyone, and thank you for listening to my story. True EMS horror story. I worked as a dispatcher for a pretty small ambulance station near a fairly large city in the middle of the US. IDK how specific I can be since this is a true story, and I'm going to tell one of the craziest stories I have from this job. We had a patient who we will call Susan. She was a dialysis patient, and one of the services we offered was to take very unwell or disabled patients to and from these dialysis appointments. She lived with her son, who we will call David. He was in his late 40s, and his mother, Susan, in her late 70s or so. Every week, like clockwork, we would have a unit bring Susan to and from her dialysis treatments 3 times a week. Everyone knew her at the station because we had been doing this for quite some time with Susan. We were all familiar with her and her son, whether it was the crew seeing her in person and taking care of her, or speaking to her or her son on the phone frequently about the appointments as I had done. Everyone knew her. Naturally, when crews had news about her health, they would report back to keep everyone in the loop with how she was. At one point, she was not feeling well at all, but she wanted to go to her dialysis appointment, so naturally we obliged and took her in. At this appointment, while receiving dialysis treatment, she lost consciousness and was promptly taken by our crew to the hospital. When it was time again for her dialysis appointment, we gave the hospital a call to see if she had been released and was able to go to the appointment. The hospital staff informed us that she would likely be released the following day and would be receiving that dialysis treatment in the hospital. Then, the next treatment time rolled around, and we called the hospital, and we were told she had been released from their care the other day. This was great news, but a little strange, due to the fact that we were always her first call to transport her to or from any hospital or appointment, and we hadn't transported her anywhere. We quickly moved on, however, and called David, her son, to see if she was going to be requiring us for her treatment that day. He informed us she wasn't feeling well and that she wasn't up to it, but that he was considering taking her back into the hospital. We tell him that if he needs us to just give us a call. Until further notice, we cancel her trip for the day. We never get a call. Next appointment rolls around, and we call David again to ask if she will be going. He says she's sick and she's back in the hospital. Weird again, since we hadn't taken her, but doesn't seem that off, considering her health had been deteriorating. Next appointment, same thing happens. We call David, his mom's in the hospital, we move on. Now is where things took a bit of a turn. When the next appointment came up, we had tried calling David to ask about his mother's status, but he never answered or returned our calls. So, being that we had a contract with Susan, and were to take her to these appointments unless told otherwise, we sent a crew to collect her for treatment. When the crew arrived at scene, they knocked on the door to no response. They knocked again, and were greeted by David smoking a cigarette. David seeming surprised. The crew said they were there to pick up Susan for her appointment. David responded, stating he had forgotten to call, but Susan was still in the hospital, not doing well. The crew gave their best wishes, and David shut the door. But the crew felt like something was off. They immediately radioed to dispatch that something was wrong, and they requested we call the hospital David said she was at to see if she was still there. The hospital had no record of her being there since we last knew, so we had the crew leave the scene, and we called for a welfare check on Susan at her son's home. We heard nothing the rest of the day from police, David, Susan, or anyone else involved. The next morning, I came into work, and the very first call I took began with, "This is Sheriff. I'm calling to report back on the welfare check you asked us to perform yesterday." I was nervous as he sounded concerned, and I didn't really expect them to call us back with any news. He proceeded to let me know that upon arrival to the home, they spoke with David, who was adamant his mother didn't feel well, but that she was home from the hospital. The police asked to just check on Susan to make sure she was all right, and eventually David obliged, letting the police in. Once entering the home, they were met with a grim scene, though I imagine they investigating the lights of people who were real, winning. They continued to explain that what the officers observed was the body of Susan propped up on the couch wrapped in blankets, as if watching the television. But she had been gone for a while. When speaking to David, they found that he had been changing her clothes regularly and watching TV with her. Obviously, he was suffering from some sort of mental issue and grief, but the thing was, he had never taken good care of her until she was dead. No news coverage, no updates from police further than that, nothing. Stuff like this happens in your hometown, and you'll never know. Crazy, right? Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment. It really helps the channel grow and keeps videos like these coming. See you in the next one.